The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock sharp. I put the paper down and headed for the front door, already knowing who I'd see on the doorstep. Heather stood smiling, holding a large paper bag that smelled of fried chicken and some kind of spicy seasoning. Behind her shoulder, Cole loomed with his usual impassive expression, staring at my front door as if he were seeing it for the first time. "Daddy, we brought dinner," my daughter said, pushing past me into the hallway. "I know you don't like to cook on weekday nights." Cole gave me a silent nod and followed his wife, leaving wet footprints on the doormat. It was drizzling outside, and his shoes glistened with water. He was a man of few words, which I always considered his virtue. Better a silent son-in-law than a blabbermouth who would ask for advice on every subject. "Thank you, of course," I said, closing the door and turning the lock. "But I'm pretty good at cooking on my own. I was planning on making a bacon omelet tonight." Heather was already heading for the kitchen, ignoring my words. The heels of her shoes clacked on the wooden floor of the hallway. She started pulling containers of food out of the bag, setting them on the table with the busyness of a lady of the house. At 46, she retained the same habit of command that she'd had as a child. At the time, it had seemed like the sweet stubbornness of a little princess. Now it was sometimes annoying. "Mashed potatoes, green beans, and grilled chicken," she listed, opening the containers one by one. "Just the way you like it. And there's apple pie for dessert from that bakery on Main Street." Cole sat down at the table without waiting for an invitation. The chair creaked under his weight. He worked as an auto mechanic in a shop near downtown Lancaster and always looked a little tired after a day's work. His greasy blonde hair, which he slicked back with gel, and pale skin with a scattering of freckles made him look older than his 42 years. His hands showed stains of machine oil that he couldn't quite wash off. "How are things going in the shop?" I asked, sitting down across from him. "It's okay," Cole mumbled. "There's plenty of work to do." Heather handed us our plates and began serving us food. Her movements were quick, precise. She'd always been an active woman who didn't tolerate long pauses or inactivity. "They had a busy day today," she said, sitting down next to her husband. "Some accident on the highway. 3 cars had to be repaired." Cole hummed, confirming her words. We ate the first few minutes in silence. The food wasn't bad, though I found the chicken a little too salty. Heather occasionally commented on the quality of the side dishes, complained about the traffic on the main street, talked about a sale at the local mall where she worked as a manager in the cosmetics department. The usual chatter about everyday things that didn't require me to actively participate in the conversation. "You know, Daddy," she said, cutting off a piece of chicken, "I ran into Mrs. Jenkins from the grocery store today. She was asking about you, how you were doing, how you were feeling." "What did you tell her?" "That you're fine, but you're getting old like the rest of us." She said she was thinking about moving closer to the kids in Philadelphia too. I nodded, continuing to eat. Mrs. Jenkins was a pleasant woman in her 70s with whom we occasionally exchanged a few words in the store. No wonder she was contemplating moving in with her family. "And do you remember Mrs. Thompson from Oak Street?" Heather continued. "She fell in the bathtub last week and lay there for hours until a neighbor missed her. Good thing her daughter had the keys to the house." "Was she seriously hurt?" I asked. "Fractured femur. She's in the hospital now. The doctors say it's going to take a long time to recover at her age." Cole lifted his head from his plate and looked at me carefully. There was something evaluative in his gaze, as if he were studying my reaction to my wife's account of the elderly woman's accident. "It's scary to imagine," Heather added, shaking her head, "lying there unassisted, unable to reach a cell phone." "I have a cell phone," I said. "I keep it with me at all times." Of course you do. But still, at that age, anything can happen." We got to dessert. The apple pie was really good, with a crisp crust and a tender filling. Heather cut it into even slices and placed them neatly on plates. "By the way, Daddy," she said, handing me a plate of pie, "I saw a truck outside Mrs. Coleman's house today. Looks like they're finally moving her." "Moving her where?" I asked, even though I suspected the answer. "To the Sunny Days nursing home on the outskirts of town. Remember when we drove by there last month when we went to the hardware store? It's such a beautiful building, state of the art. They have medical staff there 24/7, entertainment programs, and even a small garden for walking. I remember that building. It was just a nursing home, like a lot of nursing homes all over the country. A three-story brick structure with small windows and a manicured front lawn. It wasn't anything particularly beautiful or modern, but it looked decent enough. Mrs. Coleman is 78, the daughter continued, putting another piece of pie on her plate. At her age, it's hard to manage a house on your own, especially a big one like that. She's got 4 bedrooms, 2 floors, steep stairs. It's a good thing the kids took care of the move ahead of time. Cole looked at me again with the same appraising gaze. He chewed his pie slowly, taking his time to answer any questions. In advance, when? I asked. Well, while they're still sane and can make their own decisions, Heather explained, licking her fork. Not wait until it gets really bad and you have to act in an emergency, in a hurry, without being able to choose the best option. She stood up and began collecting the empty plates, stacking them neatly. She moved through my kitchen with confidence, knowing where everything was. Over the years of visits, she'd learned the layout of all the cabinets and drawers. Cole leaned back in his chair and folded his arms across his chest, watching his wife. Your house is nice, Clarence, he said suddenly, addressing me by my first name, which was rare. It's solid, well built. You must have had your hands in the right place when you built it. Thank you, I said, surprised by the unexpected compliment. But it's big for one person, he added after a pause. I like the space, I replied. Of course you do, Heather agreed, rinsing the plates under the faucet. But think practically, Dad. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, large living room, dining room, study. How many utilities in the winter? And the cleaning every week. What if something breaks? Plumbing, electricity, heating. She spoke calmly, but you could hear the tension in her voice. It was as if she had rehearsed these words beforehand, thought out every argument. I'm doing okay for now, I said. For now, she said again, turning off the water. But time marches on, Dad. You're already 74. That's not a reproach, just a fact. Heather wiped her hands with a towel and turned back to me. She had the expression of a caring daughter on her face, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. I'd seen that expression when she was haggling with the clerks at the store or discussing working conditions with her bosses. Cole and I were thinking, she continued, moving closer, maybe we should consider our options. Not right now, of course, but in the long run, so that it wouldn't be like Mrs. Coleman's, at the last minute and in a hurry when there's not much choice. What options? I asked, even though I knew the direction of the conversation. There are some very decent places for people your age, with good staff, medical care, interesting leisure program. Not cheap, though, but if you sold the house, you'd have enough money for several years. Cole coughed and shook his head, looking at his wife warningly. Apparently she was getting ahead of herself, saying things that were planned for later. Anyway, we just want you to know that you have options, Heather finished quickly, and that will always help with any questions you have. We'll explore the options, see what's what. She walked over and kissed my cheek. The smell of her perfume was pungent, intrusive. Cole got up from his chair and headed for the exit, buttoning his jacket. Thanks for dinner, I said, walking them to the door, and for caring. You're welcome, Dad. We're family. We have to take care of each other. Cole shook my hand and walked out first. Heather lingered in the doorway, looking around the hallway, then looked at me. Think about what I said, she added quietly. You don't have to make a decision right now, but think about it. When they left, I remained seated at the kitchen table, mulling over the conversation. Heather had always been a straightforward girl, saying what she thought without much concern for diplomacy. But today there was a calculated thoughtfulness in her words. She looked around the kitchen several times, lingering at the window overlooking the garden, taking a long look at the new dishwasher I'd bought 6 months ago. I got up and went into the living room. Big windows, high ceilings, a fireplace that I had built myself 30 years ago with bricks from an old farm in the country. The house was indeed spacious and perhaps too big for one person, but it was mine. I had built it with my own hands when Heather was a teenager and my wife Dorothy was still alive, and cheered the progress of the construction every day. Every board, every nail, every square foot was chosen and installed by me. I remembered how Dorothy and I chose the paint for the walls, how we argued about the layout of the kitchen, where to put the stove, and where to put the refrigerator, how happy we were when we finally moved in and spent the first night in our own home. The best years of our lives together were spent here. Maybe Heather is right about practicality. The house requires constant upkeep, and the heating costs are really quite high, especially in the winter. But selling it and moving into a nursing home? Even the nicest nursing home is still an institution where people live by other people's rules and schedules. I picked up a silver frame photograph from the coffee table. Dorothy with little Heather in the garden behind the house. The picture was taken in the summer, about 20 years ago. Dorothy smiled as she hugged her daughter, who was holding a bouquet of dandelions. Heather was about 25 years old at the time, and she looked so happy, carefree. I wonder what Dorothy would say about today's conversation. She'd always been able to read people better than I could, noticing subtexts and ulterior motives that I'd overlooked. Listen to more than just the words, Clarence, she'd say. Listen to what's behind them. People rarely say directly what they mean. What was behind her daughter's words tonight? Was it really concern for her aging father or something else entirely? I woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling, as if I had spent the whole night solving some difficult problem. Yesterday's conversation with Heather had been on my mind. I brewed a stronger coffee than usual and sat by the kitchen window, watching the neighbor's cat hunting sparrows in my garden. The gray-striped trickster was sneaking up to the feeder with professional patience, but the birds were alert. At 10:30, I decided to drive into town. I had to stop at a drugstore to get some medicine and have lunch somewhere crowded. After yesterday's thoughts about the nursing home, I wanted to go out and see some familiar faces, talk to someone about the weather or the local news. Mary's Diner was in the heart of Lancaster, on the corner of Main Street and Church Avenue. The place was small but cozy, with red vinyl seats, shiny chrome tables, and a radio always playing. It served honest, no-frills American food, burgers, fries, milkshakes, and coffee that never got cold because the waitresses kept pouring it into cups. I parked near the entrance and pushed open the glass door with brass knobs. Inside smelled like fried onions and coffee. At the far table by the window sat Roger Stanley, an old buddy of mine, whom we'd met in the Army 30 years ago. He was stirring sugar in his mug and reading the local paper, occasionally shaking his head at an article. "Roger," I called out to him, heading toward the table. He looked up and smiled. Roger was 2 years older than I was, but he looked younger with his thick locks of gray hair and trim figure. He still exercised every morning and was proud to fit into the jeans he'd worn when he was 40. "Clarence, sit down, buddy. I was just thinking about you." I sat down across from him and nodded to the waitress, who was on her way to our table with a coffee pot in her hand. "What were you thinking about?" I asked, turning the cup over. "Oh, just stuff. I've been reading up on local affairs. Do you remember David Harris, who ran a hardware store on Elm Street?" "Sure I do. What about him?" "Died last week, in a nursing home." Roger folded the paper and pushed it aside. 72 years old. Until a year ago, he was working at his store, doing everything himself. The waitress poured me coffee and brought me the menu, though I knew it by heart. Roger ordered tuna on toast. I got a regular burger and fries. "What happened to Harris?" I asked. "The kids decided he was too old for business. They made him sell the store, moved him to Sunny Days. They said he didn't last a month there. He just died." The name of the nursing home made me wince. The same Sunny Days that Heather had suggested yesterday that I consider moving to. "Did the kids want what was best for them?" I suggested. "Maybe," Roger shrugged. "Or maybe they just wanted to get the money from the sale of the store early. You know how it is. Parents live too long, and you don't want to wait for the inheritance." Roger's always been a cynic, but his words had the bitterness of personal experience. "You also have problems with children?" I asked cautiously. "I have problems." He took a sip of coffee and grimaced. "My Tommy came by last week with his wife. They say my house is too big, that I'm having trouble managing. Offered to help me find the right place." "What did you say?" "I told them to fuck off, of course, but they don't give up. Tommy called yesterday asking about my will. He said it's time to make it official so it's not a problem later." The waitress brought our orders. Roger's tuna looked delicious, my burger was juicy and hot, but my appetite was gone. "Didn't you think they were right?" I asked, picking at the fries with my fork. "Maybe it's really better to formalize everything in advance?" Roger looked at me surprised. What are you, Clarence? Have you given up on me? A will is one thing, but when your children start deciding where you live and how to dispose of your property while you're still alive, that's quite another. But they're worried about us. Worried? Roger chuckled. Worried about what? That we might live too long and spend their inheritance on our own needs? He leaned toward me and lowered his voice. Look, Clarence, I don't want to lump all kids into the same mold. There are good kids who really care about their parents. But there are also kids who are just waiting to get their hands on their parents' stuff. And they're very good at disguising greed as caring. How do you tell one from the other? By behavior. If children really care about your well-being, they will ask what you need, how to help. And if they want your money or your house, they'll talk about things you don't need anymore. Roger took half a piece of toast and chewed thoughtfully. You know what Tommy told me last week? That I didn't need such a big car, that I should sell my Cadillac and buy something smaller and cheaper. For my own safety, you know. What's wrong with that? Maybe he's really worried. Clarence, I'm 76 years old, and I drive better than half the young. I haven't had an accident in the last 10 years. I bought this Cadillac as a lifelong dream, and now my son is suggesting I give it up for safety, which is not threatened. I was silent, digesting his words. A recent conversation with Heather came to mind. What does your daughter say? Roger asked. Heather's a caring girl, if I recall. She is, I agreed. She brought me dinner last night, and she was talking about the house too, that it was too big for one person. Yeah, Roger nodded. What else did she say? I told him about last night's conversation, about the offer to consider moving, about the Sunny Days nursing home. Roger listened attentively, nodding from time to time. I see, he said when I had finished. What other suggestions had she had lately, I wondered. Now that Roger had asked me directly, various little things came to mind that I hadn't paid attention to before. About 3 months ago, she offered to open a joint bank account, for convenience, so she could help pay the bills if I got sick or went somewhere else. And did you say yes? No. I told her I could handle it on my own. She took offense, said I didn't trust her. Good girl, Roger said. What else? She discouraged me from buying a new car. My Honda was 8 years old and I was thinking of upgrading to something newer. Heather said it was a waste of money, that it would last. Roger mumbled. What does she drive? A Lexus from last year. Cole gave it to her for her birthday. I see, so she needs a new car and you don't. Makes sense. Roger finished his coffee and leaned back in his seat. Think of anything else. I strained my memory. Indeed, there were little things that seemed like acts of caring at the time. She had offered to put the house in her name while I was alive, so that I wouldn't have to deal with taxes and inheritance later. Wow, Roger whistled. That's serious. What did you say? I said I'd think about it. She explained that it would be easier for everyone, and I could live in the house for the rest of my life. Clarence, do you realize that if you deed the house to your daughter, you're effectively a tenant in your own home? But she's my daughter. She wouldn't kick out her own father. Roger looked at me with pity. Dude, what if she decides to sell the house? Or wants to rent it out? Or if she just fights with you about something? Technically, the house would belong to her, not you. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could Heather really be planning something like this? My own daughter, whom I'd raised, loved, supported in all her endeavors? Maybe you're exaggerating, I said weakly. Maybe she's really worried about my future. Maybe, Roger agreed. But it's better to overdo it than underdo it. Do you know how much your house is worth? About $350,000, I said after a moment's thought. That's not a bad sum. What are Heather and her husband's incomes? She works at the mall as a manager. He's a car mechanic. They probably make $60,000 a year together. Oh, I see. So your house is worth almost 6 times their annual salaries? That's a lot of incentive to take care of Dad. Roger paid for his lunch and got up from the table. Take my advice, Clarence. Don't sign anything. Don't renegotiate anything. And if your daughter insists on any documents, make sure you show them to a lawyer. A good lawyer, not one she brings in. You think it's that serious? I think it's best to be careful. I know a lawyer, a good guy. Patricia Graves, East Street office. If you need anything, just go to her. We walked out of the diner onto the sunny street. Roger shook my hand and headed for his shiny Cadillac. I stood outside my modest Honda and thought about our conversation. Could Heather really be planning something naughty? Or was Roger too suspicious because of his own problems with his son? It was hard to believe that the daughter I loved and who seemed to love me could be plotting against her own father. But the facts spoke for themselves. The offer to remortgage the house, the persistent talk of a joint bank account, the talk of not buying a new car, and now the hints of a nursing home. Each suggestion individually seemed reasonable, but together they added up to a definite picture. I got in the car and started the engine. It was time to go home and think seriously about what was going on in my life, and about whether or not I could trust my only daughter. Heather showed up the next day unannounced. I had just finished lunch and was washing dishes when I heard the familiar sound of her car in the driveway. Through the window, I watched her pull a leather folder out of the trunk and head toward the house with a quick, determined stride. Her movements had the businesslike air of someone who had come to deal with important matters. I opened the door before she could even ring the bell. "Hi, Daddy," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I have a couple hours of free time, and I thought we could talk about what we started talking about yesterday." "Come in," I replied, though her unexpected visit was alarming. Heather walked into the living room and sat on the couch, placing the folder on the coffee table. She was dressed in a navy blue business suit, her hair neatly styled, her makeup impeccable. Apparently, she had come straight from work or was preparing for an important meeting. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered. "No, thanks. Let's get right down to business." She opened a folder and took out some documents. "I've prepared something. The things we talked about regarding simplifying financial matters." I sat down in the chair across from her and looked at the papers in her hands. The font was small. There was a lot of text. It looked solid and official. "What is this?" I asked. "A trust agreement and a will with some changes," Heather explained, holding out the first document to me. "I consulted a lawyer, and he said it was the best way to protect your interests while ensuring a smooth transition." I took the paper and tried to read it. The legal language was complicated, full of terms I didn't understand. Trustee, irrevocable trust, transfer of powers. The words floated before my eyes. "Explain it in simple terms," I asked. Heather moved closer, her voice soft, persuasive. "It's very simple, Dad. You turn over control of your property to me, but you're still the rightful owner, and you can live in the house just like you did before. But if anything happens to you, God forbid, of course, then I can make immediate decisions without the long wait for court procedures." "What's that for?" I asked. "For your own protection. Imagine you have a stroke or something, and you can't make decisions. Without such documents, I won't be able to sell the house if I need money for medical treatment, nor will I be able to manage your accounts. Everything will be blocked by the court for months." It sounded reasonable, but something was bugging me. Maybe my daughter's overly insistent tone, or how quickly she got the paperwork ready. "What if I just gave you power of attorney in case of illness?" I suggested. "A power of attorney could easily be challenged," Heather countered, "and trust documents are much more legally enforceable. Believe me, I've looked into this very carefully." She stood up and walked over to the fireplace where our family photos stood. She picked up a picture of the three of us, me, her, and Dorothy, standing outside the newly built house. "You know, Dad, Mom always said that a family should take care of each other. Remember how she took care of Grandma in her last years? She didn't let anyone else in, did everything herself." "I remember," I said quietly. "Mom would have wanted me to take care of you the same way, so you wouldn't depend on strangers, government programs, or charity to keep everything in the family." Heather put the picture back up and turned to me. Tears glistened in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were sincere or fake. "I'm the only one you have, Dad. There's no one else to take care of you but me, and I want to do it right, the way Mom would have wanted me to." The mention of Dorothy hurt. Heather always knew how to find the most sensitive strings and play them expertly. "Give me time to think," I said. "These are serious documents, and I want to study them carefully." "Of course you do," Heather agreed, but I could hear the impatience in her voice. "But don't take too long. The sooner we get this done, the better." She sat back down on the couch and pulled out a second document. "This is the will. It's simple. The house and all the property passed to me after your death. But there is one addition that will protect your interests while you're alive." What's the addendum? If you decide to move to a nursing home or to us, the house can be rented out and the money can be used to support you. Very practical, isn't it? I could feel the tension building. So moving out of the house is already seen as an inevitability? What if I don't want to move? I asked. Dad, what are you talking about? Heather laughed, but it sounded strained. Of course you're the only one who makes the decision. It's just a precaution, just in case. I want to show these documents to a lawyer, I said firmly. Heather's expression changed instantly. The gentleness and concern were gone, leaving only irritation and something resembling anger. Why do you need a lawyer? She asked sharply. I told you I've already consulted a professional. These documents are properly drafted. I want an independent opinion. Independent? Heather stood up and started pacing the room. Independent from who? From your own daughter? You don't trust me? It's not about trust, I started, but she interrupted. Yes, it is. I spend my time, my money on consultations with a lawyer, preparing documents that will protect your interests, and you want to go to some stranger. Her voice was getting louder and louder. I could see the muscles in her neck tensing, her fist clenching. Heather, calm down. I'm not calming down, she exploded. Do you realize how much this costs? It costs $300 an hour to consult a lawyer, and it's your money in the end, because it's all going to me anyway. She stopped in front of my chair, leaning toward me. Her face was red with anger. You don't need a lawyer, she shouted. I know better than any other man's lawyer what's good for you. I'm your daughter. I'm the only one who really cares about you. Her scream echoed in the room. I sat stunned by the sudden burst of rage. This was not my caring daughter, but someone else, aggressive and demanding. Heather, I said quietly, you're yelling at me. She straightened up, breathing deeply, trying to calm herself down. Red spots burned on her cheeks. I'm sorry, she said finally. I'm just so worried about you. You don't understand how hard it is for me to see you getting older, that you might need help, and legally there's nothing I can do. I understand your worries, I replied, but I had already made the decision about a lawyer. Heather slowly gathered the papers and put them in a folder. Her movements were sharp, angry. Okay, she said coldly. Go to the lawyer. Spend the money. But remember, strangers won't look out for your interests the way I do. She headed for the exit, but turned around at the door. And remember, Daddy, time is of the essence. While you're going through lawyers and thinking about it, things can happen. And then it'll be too late to change anything. The door slammed behind her with such force that the glass in the window shook. I remained seated in the chair, trying to comprehend what had happened. My daughter, who just a short time ago was kissing me on the cheek and talking about her mother's covenants, had turned into an enraged woman demanding that I sign some documents immediately. Documents that I was beginning to realize were not in my best interest, but hers. The phrase, "you don't need a lawyer," sounded like a drumbeat in my head. It was exactly what a man who was hiding something would say. A person with pure intentions would not be afraid of an independent legal assessment. I walked over to the window and looked at the neighbor's house. Mrs. Coleman no longer sat on her porch in the evenings. Her windows were dark, the yard looked abandoned. Another story of the children taking care of an elderly mother. Roger was right. We need to be careful. And the first thing I'll do first thing tomorrow morning is find a good lawyer. The one Roger was talking about, or someone else. But make sure they're independent of Heather and her plans. I remembered the look on my daughter's face when I mentioned a lawyer. Panic, anger, an attempt to intimidate and coerce. It was the face of someone caught doing something wrong. Perhaps I've been too trusting. Perhaps I've believed for too long that family ties guarantee honesty. But today's conversation had opened my eyes. Heather wanted control of my house and my money. All of her offers, all of her care had been directed toward that goal. And when I tried to defend myself, she showed her true colors. Tomorrow I'll get a lawyer. Tomorrow I'll start defending what I've built over a lifetime. From my own daughter, if need be. The next morning I woke up with a firm resolve to act. It was a restless night, waking up several times from strange dreams where Heather was trying to get me to sign some papers, and I couldn't read what they said. At 7 in the morning, I was already sitting in the kitchen with a cup of strong coffee and a phone book, looking for the number of a law firm on East Street. Patricia Graves, whom Roger had recommended, turned out to be a pleasant middle-aged woman with a professional but friendly voice. When I explained the situation in general terms, she agreed to meet at 11 o'clock this morning. Mr. Miller, she said, from your description, the situation really needs attention. I will also ask a colleague to attend the meeting. Daniel Cox specializes specifically in family law and elder law. Won't it cost too much? I asked anxiously. The first consultation is free. Beyond that, we'll discuss if our help is needed. I had a quick breakfast, put on my best suit, and drove into town. The law office was in a beautiful old red brick building that had once housed a bank. The receptionist ushered me into a spacious office with high ceilings and large windows overlooking the main street. Patricia Graves was an elegant woman of about 55, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun and attentive brown eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. She was dressed in a dark gray business suit and exuded the kind of confidence that comes only with years of professional experience. Next to her sat Daniel Cox, a man in his 40s, tall and thin, with a neat beard and a shrewd eye. "Sit down, Mr. Miller," Patricia suggested, pointing to a comfortable chair across the table. "Tell us in detail what's going on." I told them everything. Heather's visits, her offers on the house and bank accounts, the scene with the documents yesterday, and the screaming about not needing a lawyer. The lawyers listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Daniel Cox made notes in his notebook, and Patricia nodded, showing that she understood the problem. "Mr. Miller," she said when I finished, "I'm afraid your suspicions are well-founded. What you are describing is called financial exploitation of the elderly. Unfortunately, it's very common." "But it's my daughter," I objected weakly. "She can't mean me any harm." Daniel Cox looked up from his notes. "Statistics show that in 70% of cases of financial exploitation of the elderly, the perpetrators are close relatives, adult children, nephews, grandchildren. Blood ties, unfortunately, do not guarantee honest intentions." "Let's go through the documents your daughter brought you," Patricia suggested. "Did you bring them with you?" I pulled out the folder Heather had left yesterday. The lawyers scrutinized the papers, looking at each other and shaking their heads. "This is too bad," Daniel said finally. "If you signed those documents, you would effectively lose control of your entire estate." But Heather said that I'd still be the owner. "Technically, yes," Patricia explained, "but she would manage the property. She could sell, buy, rent, borrow against the house without your consent. And this paragraph is particularly interesting," Daniel added, pointing to one of the pages. "It says that the trustee, which is your daughter, has the right to make decisions about your medical care and where you live if she deems you incompetent. Meaning she can place you in a nursing home against your will, citing your alleged incapacity, and it would be very difficult to prove otherwise." I felt a chill go down my spine. So Heather's plan was even more cynical than I thought. "What do I do?" I asked. "First, don't sign anything," Patricia said. "Second, you need to document the coercion, preferably in front of witnesses." "How do I do that?" Daniel Cox thought for a moment. "What if we invite the daughter to the conversation and ask her to repeat yesterday's arguments? In front of us, as witnesses. If she's really planning something bad, she's bound to give herself away." "Would you agree to come to my house?" I wondered. "Of course," Patricia nodded. "It's part of our job. We often go to our clients' homes." "But how would you explain your presence to Heather?" "We don't have to explain in advance," Daniel smiled. "Just ask your daughter to come to sign the documents. And when she arrives, introduce us as the lawyers who are to witness the procedure." "I mean, she was yelling yesterday that I didn't need a lawyer, right?" "Exactly," Patricia agreed. "Ask her to repeat those words. If her intentions are pure, she won't be embarrassed by the presence of lawyers. If not, she'll show her true colors." We agreed to meet at my house at 7 p.m. The lawyers gave me their business cards and once again warned me not to sign anything without their presence. At home, I thought long and hard about how best to call Heather. I didn't want to lie, but it wasn't wise to reveal my cards beforehand. I finally dialed her number. "Heather, it's Dad. Could you come over with Cole tonight? I've been thinking about what you're proposing, and I'd like to talk about it." "You do?" There was joy and relief in her voice. "Have you decided to sign the papers?" "I want to go over it again. Come by around 7. "Of course, Dad. We'll be there." I'm so glad you realized I really want to help you. After the conversation, I felt a prick of conscience. After all, this is my daughter, the only person close to me. Maybe I'm making a mistake. Maybe she really cares about me, just not expressing it well. But then I remembered her screaming last night, her angry face, her threats, and the lawyers saying that blood ties don't guarantee honesty. At 7:30, Patricia and Daniel arrived. They parked away from the house so Heather wouldn't see their car beforehand. We went over the plan of action one more time. The main thing is to stay calm, Patricia advised. Let the daughter do the talking, and we will listen and remember. And if she refuses to talk in front of us? I asked. Then that would be telling too, Daniel replied. A man with pure intentions is not afraid of witnesses. Heather's Lexus pulled up in front of the house at exactly 7 in the evening. I saw her through the window, saying something to Cole, both of them smiling. Apparently they thought the deed was done. Heather was in high spirits. She said hello cheerfully, kissed me on the cheek, and asked me how my day was going. Cole shook my hand and nodded with his usual taciturnity. They made their way to the living room, where they were met with a surprise in the form of two strangers in business suits. "Daddy, who is this?" Heather asked, and the smile slipped from her face. "Allow me to introduce," I said solemnly. "Patricia Graves and Daniel Cox, attorneys. They're here to make sure we get the paperwork right." Heather's face paled. Cole frowned and looked at the lawyers carefully. "We agreed to discuss the documents in the family circle," Heather said tensely. "Now we'll discuss them in front of the expert," I said. "You said yesterday that the documents were correct, so the lawyers will confirm it." Patricia and Daniel watched in silence. Heather glanced between them and me. "Look, Dad," she began, "why don't we postpone the meeting? I wasn't prepared to talk in front of strangers." "Strangers?" I questioned. "But these are professionals. They'll help us understand the legalities." "I don't like that approach," Cole said sharply. "Why involve outsiders in family matters? Remember, Heather," I said, looking my daughter straight in the eye, "what you said yesterday about lawyers." "I don't remember," she answered quickly. "You don't remember? And I remember very well. You were yelling, 'You don't need a lawyer.' Do you remember now?" Heather turned even paler. She looked at Cole, who shook his head faintly. "I was upset," she said quietly. "I didn't mean it." "What did you mean?" I insisted. "Please repeat what you said yesterday, in front of these honorable people." "Yeah, I'm not repeating anything," Heather said, her voice hysterical. "It's a provocation." "A provocation?" Daniel Cox wondered softly. "Ms. Miller, your father just wants to discuss the documents in front of the lawyers. It's normal practice in serious transactions." "My last name is Thompson," Heather corrected him sharply, "and I don't have to explain anything to strangers." "Okay, Mrs. Thompson," Daniel agreed, "but you did bring the papers for your father to sign, didn't you? We could go over them together." "No," Heather exploded. "I'm not going to let you poke around in our family business." She stood up abruptly from the couch and grabbed her bag. "Cole, we're leaving. This is a setup." Cole stood up too, looking at me grimly. "I didn't think you were capable of this, Clarence. Framing your own daughter." "Framed?" I questioned. "Frame her? How?" "I just brought in the lawyers for a consultation." "You set this situation up on purpose," Heather shouted. "You lured us here under false pretenses." "What false pretense?" Patricia asked calmly. "Your father said he wanted to discuss the documents. That's why we're here." "Shut up," Heather shouted. "Otto, nobody's asking you." "Heather," I said firmly, "please repeat what you said yesterday about lawyers. Verbatim." "I will not. And I don't want to talk to you after that betrayal." She headed for the exit, but turned around at the door. Her face was contorted with anger. "Remember, Daddy, you chose these strangers over your own daughter. You chose them." The door slammed. Through the window, I saw them quickly get into the car and drive away with a screech of tires. There was silence in the living room. Patricia and Daniel looked at each other. "Well," Patricia said finally, "that's quite a reaction. A man with good intentions wouldn't be so nervous about having lawyers around," Daniel added, "much less yell and slam doors." I sank into the chair, feeling both relieved and bitter. On the one hand, I'd gotten an answer to my questions about my daughter's intentions. On the other hand, It was the most unpleasant answer possible. Mr. Miller, Patricia said softly, I understand how difficult this is for you, but you did the right thing. It's better to know the truth now than to lose your home and independence later. What's going to happen next? I asked. Next, we'll help you protect your interests, Daniel replied. We'll draw up a will that will be protected from contestation. We'll prepare documents in case your daughter tries to declare you incompetent. We'll teach you how to resist pressure. They spent another half an hour explaining to me the legal intricacies, giving me advice, discussing possible courses of action. When they left, I was alone in the silence of my house. The house that Heather wanted to take away, the house I'd built with my own hands, where I'd spent my best years with Dorothy, where I planned to live the rest of my days. Now I knew I'd fight for it, and I knew who to fight. My daughter had shown her true face, and that face was the face of the enemy. After the door slammed and the tires squealed, I sat in my chair trying to process what had happened. Patricia Graves and Daniel Cox were silent, giving me time to digest what I had seen. Outside the window, the fall evening was darkening. The streetlights were on, and the usual quiet of the suburbs seemed especially profound after the violent scene with Heather. Mr. Miller, Patricia said softly at last, are you all right? I honestly don't know, I answered. One part of me is relieved that it's all cleared up. The other can't believe my own daughter would do something like this. Daniel Cox took out a notebook and a pen. Let's record what happened today while it's fresh in our minds. It might come in handy in the future. Do you think they'll try anything else? I asked. Almost certainly, Patricia replied. People who plan for financial exploitation rarely give up after the first failure, especially when such substantial sums of money are involved. We methodically reconstructed the chronology of events, from Heather's first hints that the house was too big to today's escape scene at the sight of the lawyers. Daniel wrote down every detail, including exact quotes from our conversations. The phrase, "you don't need a lawyer," is especially important, he pointed out. This is a classic sign of fraudulent schemes. Honest people are never dissuaded from getting independent legal advice. What about her behavior today? I asked. When she refused to repeat what she said? That's a characteristic too, Patricia explained. If her intentions were pure, she would have explained the situation calmly and not made a scene. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent, clearly not friendly. We looked at each other. They must be back, I said. That's good, Daniel nodded. Let's see what they have to say now. I opened the door. Heather and Cole were standing in the doorway, but they looked different. Heather had obviously been crying. Her eyes were red, her mascara smeared a little. Cole had his hand on her shoulder, pretending to be a supportive husband. Daddy, Heather said in a shaky voice, can I come in? I have some explaining to do. I stepped back silently, letting them into the house. They walked into the living room where the lawyers were still sitting. Ah, you're still here, Cole said without much pleasure. We're here at Mr. Miller's invitation, Patricia replied calmly. Heather sat on the edge of the couch, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at me with pleading eyes. Daddy, I want to apologize for the way I acted. I was upset and I said a lot of things I shouldn't have said, but you have to understand, this is a very sensitive subject for me. What kind of subject? I asked. That you're getting older, that I'm going to have to take care of you. Mom died so young, I'm afraid of losing you too. Her voice trembled, and I felt a familiar pang of pity. But Roger's words about looking at actions, not words, kept me sober. Heather, Daniel Cox interjected, can you explain why you reacted so strongly to the lawyer's presence? If your intentions are honorable, a professional consultation should have pleased you. I'm not used to officialism in family matters, she replied. I thought my father and I could work things out on our own. But the documents you brought were drawn up by a lawyer, Patricia said. So you've been formalizing things. Heather hesitated. This is different. I wanted to protect Dad's interests. Protect what from whom? I asked. All kinds of crooks, frauds. There are a lot of cases of elderly people being scammed these days. Cole coughed and signaled his wife. She must have said something wrong. Mrs. Thompson, Daniel said, we've been going over the documents you brought your father. I must say that they give you very wide powers to administer his estate. And what's wrong with that? I'm his daughter. What's wrong, Patricia explained, is that according to these documents, you can sell your father's house without his consent. You can put him in a nursing home against his will. You can use his money as you see fit. But I would never do that, Heather exclaimed. Then why are there clauses like that in the documents? Daniel asked. It's standard wording. The lawyer said so. What lawyer? Patricia asked. Could you give us his contact information? We'd like to talk to him about the disputed wording. Heather hesitated again. I don't remember his name exactly. Cole, do you remember? Cole was grimly silent. It was becoming obvious that either there was no lawyer or he was drafting the documents for the very purpose of taking my property from me. Heather, I said, answer me honestly. Were you planning on selling my house? Of course not. She jumped up from the couch. How can you ask me that? What about the nursing home? Were you planning on putting me there? Only if you get sick. If you can't live on your own, who's going to decide whether I can live alone or not? The doctors, of course. According to the documents you've brought, it will be up to you, Daniel intervened. Without doctors and courts. That's not true, Heather shouted, but her voice sounded uncertain. Cole finally spoke. That's enough. Heather, let's get out of here. I'm not listening to your father being turned against us. No one's turning me against anyone, I countered. They're just asking questions that don't have honest answers. Honest answers? Cole stood up and moved toward me. What's honest about ambushing lawyers? Mr. Thompson, Patricia said firmly, please remain calm. Don't tell me what to do, Cole shouted. We're trying to help an old man, and you're meddling with legal technicalities. How are you trying to help him? Daniel asked. Specifically, Carmine, we're trying to make sure he doesn't become homeless in his old age. Cole waved his arms. So that the house won't have to be sold in a hurry if he needs expensive medical treatment. And that's why you want the right to dispose of the house while he's still alive? Patricia clarified. It's a reasonable precaution. Reasonable for whom? I asked. For me or for you? Cole turned sharply toward me. Clarence, you ungrateful old man. Heather and I are spending time and money to give you a peaceful old age, and you suspect us of cheating? Spending money? I questioned. What money? On consultations with a lawyer, on trips to you, to worry about your future. Mr. Thompson, Daniel said coldly, time and money to take care of a relative are normal family expenses. They don't entitle you to claim compensation in the form of real estate. Who said anything about compensation? Heather shrieked. We're talking about getting it right. Right for who? I insisted. For the family, Heather shouted. We're family, or have you forgotten? Family doesn't do fraud, I said quietly. The words had the effect of a bomb going off. Heather turned pale, then red. Cheating? You call taking care of your daughter fraud? I call it fraud to try to take my house away from me under the guise of caring. We don't want to take it away, she sobbed. We want it to be so there won't be any problems later. What kind of trouble? Patricia asked. Your father is healthy, capable of making his own decisions. What kind of problems could there be? If he gets sick, then he'll decide what to do. Or he could go to court and get a guardian appointed. Why deprive him of that right beforehand? Heather looked between me and the lawyers. It was obvious that she realized her plans had been discovered, but she was still trying to find a way out. Daddy, she said in a pleading tone, do you really think I want to hurt you? Don't you trust your own daughter? Heather, I said tiredly, after what I've learned about your plans, I don't know who to trust. What plans? We don't have any plans. Then why were you yelling that I didn't need a lawyer? I was upset. Why did you refuse to repeat yourself in front of a lawyer? Because it was humiliating. Who would find it humiliating to tell the truth? Cole grabbed his wife's hand. Heather, come on, we're wasting our time. The old man won't listen to us. But he's my father, she sobbed. Your father chose strangers over family. That's his decision. Cole pulled Heather toward the exit, but she broke free and came to me. Daddy, she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. You're going to regret this. When you get sick, when you need help, and those lawyers aren't around, then you'll realize that family comes first. Family comes first, I agreed. But you're not acting like a family. We're acting like people who are thinking about the future, she screamed. And you're acting like a selfish person who only thinks about yourself. Heather, Cole sharply called out to her. Let's go. Now! He grabbed her arm again and dragged her toward the door. Heather turned around as he continued to say, "You'll understand, Daddy. You'll realize we meant well. But then it'll be too late." The door slammed even louder than the first time. The car started with a roar and sped off into the night. The living room was silent again. Patricia and Daniel sat in silence, giving me time to calm down. "Well," Daniel said at last, "the picture is clear now." "They showed all their cards," Patricia added, "and it was obvious that this was an attempt to take your property." "What do I do now?" I asked. "Prepare for the fact that they won't give up," Daniel answered. "Most likely the next step will be to try to pressure them through other people or threaten them with legal action." "What kind of lawsuits?" "An attempt to have you declared incompetent, for example, or accusations that you're under the influence of outsiders. That would be us." Patricia pulled out a business card. "Mr. Miller, if they try to contact you, don't negotiate on your own. Call us right away. Any conversations must take place in the presence of counsel." "You think it'll go to trial?" "It could, but we have recordings of today's conversations, witnesses to their behavior. If it goes to trial, we can protect your interests." When the lawyers left, I was alone in a house I almost lost. A house where I spent most of my life, where I was happy with Dorothy, where I raised Heather. Now that house was the cause of a war between me and my only daughter. A war I didn't want, but one that had been forced upon me. I walked over to the picture on the mantel, the one with the three of us standing outside the newly built house. Dorothy smiling, little Heather looking so innocent and happy. What would Dorothy say about what happened today? Would she approve of my actions? Or would she accuse me of destroying the family? But I didn't destroy the family. It was greed that destroyed the family. The next 3 days passed in anxious anticipation. I knew Heather wouldn't give up so easily, so every ring of the phone, every rustle outside the window made me wary. Patricia Graves had warned me that people with such intentions rarely backed down after the first setback, especially when it came to such large sums of money. A house worth $350,000 was too much to give up so easily. I went on with my normal life, going to the store for groceries, meeting Roger at the diner, working in the garden, cleaning up fallen leaves. But it was all automatic, without the pleasure I'd had before. My thoughts kept returning to the last scene with my daughter, to her tears and accusations, to Cole's threatening words. On Wednesday morning, as I was watering the flowers in the front flower bed, an unfamiliar car pulled up in front of the house, a gray mid-size sedan. Out of it stepped a woman of about 35, wearing a business suit and carrying a folder in her hands. She headed toward me with a professional smile. "Mr. Miller? My name is Rachel Davis, and I'm a social worker with the Department of Senior Citizens. I was wondering if we could have a word." My heart sank, so Heather had already started going through official channels. "What's this about?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "We've received information that you may need additional support. I've come to assess the situation and offer options." "Who gave you the information?" "It's confidential, but the person who came forward expresses grave concern for your well-being." I invited her into the house, having first called Patricia to inform her of the visit. The lawyer said she'd be here immediately and asked me not to sign anything until she arrived. Rachel Davis turned out to be a pleasant woman who tried to keep the conversation in a friendly tone. She asked questions about my health, social contacts, ability to care for my home and myself. I answered honestly. Yes, I live alone after the death of my wife. Yes, I manage household chores. Yes, I see a doctor regularly and take prescribed medications. "Do you have a family?" she asked. "Daughter?" I answered briefly. "And how is your relationship? Does she help you?" Relationships are difficult, especially lately. Rachel wrote down my answers in her notebook, nodding occasionally. When Patricia arrived, the social worker was a little tense, but continued the conversation. "Mr. Miller," Rachel said, "the person who contacted us claims that you are refusing family support and have fallen under the influence of outsiders who may be taking advantage of you." Patricia grinned. "Miss Davis, could you be more specific about who exactly expressed this concern?" "I can't divulge that information, but I can speculate," Patricia said. "We recently attended a conversation between Mr. Miller and his daughter, who tried to force him to sign documents transferring control of his estate to her. When Mr. Miller refused, the daughter created a scandal. Rachel's face grew more serious. Is this true, Mr. Miller? I told her the whole story, from Heather's first hints to the last scene with the lawyers. Rachel listened intently, taking notes. I see, she said finally. In that case, the situation looks very different. There seems to be an attempt at financial exploitation, rather than a need for social support. She closed the folder and stood up. Mr. Miller, I'll make a report that you are capable, living independently, and not in need of involuntary guardianship. If we receive any more complaints from your daughter, we will know how to treat them. After she left, Patricia shook her head. Your daughter is wasting no time. Contacting social services is a classic move in these cases. What will happen next? She'll probably try other means of pressure. Be prepared. Patricia was right. Friday night, as I was having dinner alone, the doorbell rang. It was Heather, but she looked completely different from the last time I'd seen her. No aggression, no yelling, just sadness and tiredness. She was dressed simply, almost modestly, no makeup, her hair gathered into a simple ponytail. Daddy, she said quietly, can I come in? I want to talk. Humanly, without shouting or scandalizing. I let her into the house. She went into the living room and sat on the same couch where she'd thrown a tantrum a week ago. But now her posture was completely different. Hunched, resigned, miserable. Daddy, I want to apologize, she began, looking down at the floor. For everything. For yelling. For crying. For bringing coal. I was wrong. What exactly were you wrong about? I asked gently. For trying to decide for you. For thinking I knew better what you needed. For not listening to your objections. She looked up, and I saw such pain in her eyes that my heart shook. You see, Daddy, when Mom died, I swore to myself that I would take care of you, that I wouldn't let you be alone in your time of need. And when I see you getting older, when I see you finding it harder to manage the house, her voice trembled and she fell silent, gathering her thoughts. I'm afraid, Daddy. I'm afraid of what happened to Mom. Remember how quickly she faded away after the diagnosis? How there was nothing we could do to help. I don't want to go through that kind of helplessness again. Memories of Dorothy's last months were indeed painful. The cancer was progressing rapidly, and there was nothing we could do but watch her go. Is that why you want to prepare everything in advance? I asked. Yes, so that if something happens, we can act quickly, so that we don't waste time on bureaucracy and formalities. It sounded reasonable and touching. But I remembered the lawyer's words that the documents she'd brought gave her rights far beyond reasonable preparation. Heather, I said softly, but those documents you brought, they gave you full control of my estate while I was still alive. I know, she nodded, and I understand why you were afraid. In fact, the lawyer warned me that the wording might seem too harsh, but he said that otherwise the documents might not be enforceable in a critical situation. What lawyer? What's his name? Robert King. He has an office across town. Cole found him through a recommendation from a friend. She pulled a business card out of her bag and handed it to me. It looked real, with embossed letters and a logo. You see, Dad, Heather continued, I don't want your money or your house. I want the assurance that I can help you when you need it, that I won't stand by and watch you suffer through red tape. What about the nursing home? You spoke of it as inevitable. Not inevitable, she countered, as an option. If you get really sick, if you can't live alone, isn't that a reasonable precaution? I was silent, thinking about her words. They sounded logical, caring, not at all like the shouting and threats of a week ago. Why did you react that way when the lawyers showed up? I asked. Heather sighed. Because it seemed to me that you didn't trust me, that you preferred the opinion of strangers to that of your own daughter. It hurt, Dad. It really hurt. But the independent counseling... I understand, she interrupted. I understand now. You were entitled to a second opinion. I just took it as a personal insult. She stood up and walked over to the fireplace where the family photos were. You know what upsets me the most? She said without turning around. That I spend all my free time worrying about you, and you think I'm trying to cheat you. What do you mean, all your free time? What do you mean? She turned around with a sad smile. Researching information on nursing homes in case I need one. Reading about health insurance for the elderly. talking to lawyers about the best way to handle the paperwork, thinking about how to make sure you live a peaceful life. And your own life? Your job? Your husband? Your friends? Cole understands. He knows how worried I am about you. Sometimes he says I think too much about problems that aren't there yet, but he supports me. Heather sat back down on the couch and looked at me with pleading eyes. Daddy, I don't want to fight. I don't want lawyers and suspicion between us. We're family. We're each other's only family. So you're suggesting we forget about legal counseling? No, she shook her head. If it makes you feel better, have your lawyers review any documents I bring in. Have them explain the ins and outs of it to you. I don't mind. That was unexpected. Is she really willing to be transparent? You're saying she's willing to have lawyers present for any discussion? Yes, if it gives you peace of mind. The important thing is that we don't lose each other over misunderstandings. She got up and came over to me. Daddy, can I give you a hug? I missed a normal relationship so much. I let her hug me. She smelled of a familiar perfume she had used as a teenager. For a moment it seemed that all misunderstandings could really be forgotten, that my daughter was back to being the caring girl she once was. Thank you, Daddy, she whispered, for listening, for giving me a chance to explain myself. After she left, I sat in my chair for a long time, analyzing the conversation. Heather had been convincing, sincere, logical. Perhaps I really had been too quick to suspect her of bad intentions. Perhaps it was due to the poor wording of the documents and my suspicion. But something was still unsettling. Too abrupt a change in behavior. Too convenient explanations for all the points of contention. And most importantly, why hadn't she offered such transparency right away, but had thrown a tantrum at the sight of the lawyers? I called Patricia and told her about the conversation. Mr. Miller, she said after a pause, it's called a change of tactics. When the aggressive approach doesn't work, you go for the emotional approach. But she agreed to have lawyers present. That could be part of a new strategy. Agree to your terms, let her guard down, then go through other channels. You think she's being disingenuous? I think we have to be careful. People with honest intentions don't change so drastically in a few days. The advice was sound, but I felt tired of suspicion and mistrust. I wanted to believe that my daughter had truly realized her mistakes and was ready for an honest dialogue. Time would tell which version would turn out to be true. The call came on Monday morning, while I was eating my breakfast of oatmeal with raisins and reading the local newspaper. It was exactly 8 o'clock on the clock, a time when most people are already rushing to work. The number on the phone screen was unfamiliar, but I recognized the voice immediately. Clarence, it's Cole. We need to talk. His tone was serious, businesslike, without the usual ostentatious politeness. I remembered Patricia's advice that I should write down all conversations with Heather and her husband in case I needed proof. I'd bought a small tape recorder last week, and now I quickly turned it on, placing it next to the phone. I'm listening, I answered neutrally. Just honestly, without those lawyers of yours. Man talk, you know? I understand. Go ahead. Cole was quiet for a few seconds, as if gathering his thoughts. Look, man, this has gone too far. Heather cried all night last night after talking to you. She thought you two were going to make up, and you still don't trust her. What makes you think I don't trust her? Oh, come on. It's obvious that you suspect us of a hell of a lot of things. Heather told me about your questions, how you're going through lawyers. I sipped my coffee, giving him time to speak. I could hear the irritation in Cole's voice, which he tried to hide under the mask of friendly conversation. Cole, what's the problem? If your intentions are pure, then the presence of lawyers shouldn't bother you. The problem is that you've turned a family matter into some kind of legal procedure. We want to help you, and you treat us like criminals. Nobody called you criminals. No, but you think you are. Why else would you have so many lawyers? There was a metallic note in his voice that he was no longer trying to hide. Look, Clarence, he continued, I'm going to tell you straight, man to man. Heather is my wife, and I'm not going to let anyone make her suffer, even if that someone is her father. What do you mean? I mean that if you keep playing these games with the lawyers, if you keep suspecting us of bad intentions, then I'm going to have to protect my family. The threat was veiled but understandable. I felt my heart racing, but I tried to keep my tone calm. Protect me from what? Your paranoia. You do realize that at your age, suspicion and distrust of loved ones can be signs of, well, certain problems. What kind of problems? Age-related mental changes. Old age paranoia. I don't know what people would think if they knew a 74-year-old man suspected his own daughter of trying to rob him. Now the threat was more explicit. Cole was alluding to the possibility of me being declared incompetent. Cole, are you threatening me? I'm not threatening you, he replied with false innocence. I'm just explaining what the situation might look like from the outside. An elderly man who lives alone begins to suspect his relatives of something that isn't there, refuses help from family, trusts only strangers. Classic signs of age-related paranoia. And if those suspicions are well-founded, justified by whom? Your lawyers, who make money off your fears? Clarence, you're a smart man. Don't you realize these lawyers are just scamming you for money? The first consultation was free. The first one was. And then what? Next thing you know, they'll be charging you $300 an hour to convince you of a danger that doesn't exist. Cole sounded more and more confident, like he was reading a prepared speech. Look, old man, I'll try to explain the situation to you from a business point of view. You own a house worth $350,000. That's a lot of money, I agree. But think about it. Who needs that money more? Us or the lawyers? Let me get this straight. Heather and I have stable jobs, we make decent money. We don't need your house now, but in the long run, when there's no one to leave it to, but the lawyers need your money now. The more trouble they cause, the more money they make. Interesting logic. It's not interesting, it's sound. Who benefits from you and your family fighting? Us? We have a vested interest in you living happily ever after, and it's in the lawyer's interest for you to be afraid, suspicious, hiring them to protect you from imaginary threats. I knew Cole was trying to make me doubt the integrity of the lawyers, but his arguments were too primitive. Cole, what about the documents Heather brought in? The ones that would give her full control of my estate? What's wrong with them? There's a bit of irritation in his voice. Standard estate planning documents. Any lawyer can attest to that. My lawyers don't see it that way. Your lawyers, he snorted. They have a vested interest in making sure you don't trust anyone but them. Maybe, but so far their explanations seem more convincing. Cole was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was cold and hard. All right, Clarence. Then I'll tell you one last time. We tried to work things out amicably, family style. Heather was willing to forgive your mistrust, willing to agree to any terms. But if you choose war, you get war. What do you mean? I mean there are legal ways to protect the interests of an incapacitated elderly person. If a family goes to court claiming that their relative is under the influence of fraudsters, the court is obliged to conduct an examination. Now the threat was open and specific. You want to declare me incompetent? I want to protect you from people who take advantage of your age and loneliness. If that requires going to court, then we'll go to court. On what grounds? There are plenty of grounds. You live alone, isolate yourself from your family, trust only strangers who may turn out to be crooks. You suspect your own daughter of self-interest for no good reason. What if the court decides I'm competent? Then we'll apologize and say we acted in good faith. But the process would take months, cost you a lot of money and stress. And all the while, your accounts may be frozen to protect against possible fraud. I realized it wasn't just a threat, but an elaborate plan. Even if the court eventually found me competent, the process could be a nightmare. Cole, one last question. What if I just stop talking to you? Live my life. You live yours. You can't, he answered with an unpleasant chuckle. Heather's your only relative. She's legally entitled to be concerned about your condition. And if she thinks there's anything wrong with you, she's obligated to take action. I see. It's good that you understand. Then think again, Clarence. Think about ruining your only family over some lawyers. You still have time to make things right. How much time? A week? If you don't come to your senses in a week, we'll take action. And believe me, we'll hate it as much as you do. Cole hung up without waiting for me to answer. I turned off the recorder and leaned back in my chair. The conversation had cleared up a lot of things. Heather and Cole really weren't going to give up. What's more, they had already devised a plan to enforce it through the courts. I immediately called Patricia and asked for an emergency meeting. An hour later, we were sitting in her office, listening to a tape of the conversation. "That's great, Mr. Miller," she said when the tape ended. "We have clear evidence of threats and coercion attempts. But can they really file a petition with the court to declare me incompetent?" "They can. Any relative has that right if they have cause for concern. But after this conversation, we have evidence that their motives are self-serving." "What about freezing the accounts?" "It's possible, but it's temporary, and we can prove that it's not being done to protect your interests, but to coerce you." Patricia pulled some documents out of a drawer. "Mr. Miller, I suggest we be proactive. We'll draw up a will that's protected from contestation. We'll get your mental health records. We'll create a paper trail that shows you're competent to make your own decisions." "What about their threats?" "We'll have a recording of the conversation on file. If they file an incapacity petition, we'll show the court it's for selfish motives." We spent 2 hours in the office preparing documents and discussing defense strategy. Patricia explained to me that if the case went to court, the procedure could take months, but the chances of a favorable outcome were high. "The main thing is don't panic and don't compromise," she said in parting. "They have no real grounds to declare you incompetent. All they have is a desire to get your property." At home, I sat in the chair for a long time, thinking about the situation. A week was the amount of time Cole had given me to surrender. 7 days to decide whether I would fight for my independence or surrender under the pressure of threats. I walked to the window and looked out at my garden, at the house I'd built with my own hands. It was all mine, the fruit of years of labor and effort, and I wasn't going to give it up without a fight, even if the enemy was my own daughter. Let them try to prove I was incompetent. They won't. And the tape of today's conversation will show everyone who's doing this and why. The war they declared on me was going to be brutal, but I was ready for it. The week Cole had given me to think about it had been spent feverishly preparing for a possible confrontation. I did not wait for them to carry out their threats, but decided to be proactive. On Wednesday morning, a locksmith arrived, an elderly man named Frank, who had been recommended to me by Roger. He scrutinized all the entrances to the house and shook his head. "Your locks are old, Mr. Miller," he said, twisting the key in the front door lock. "They're about 10 or 15 years old. If someone has duplicate copies of your keys, it's definitely worth changing the locks." Heather did have keys to the house. I gave them to her a few years ago in case of an emergency, when she still seemed like a caring daughter rather than a potential adversary in a lawsuit. "Bet the safest ones you've got," I told Frank. "Money's no problem." He installed new locks on the front and back doors, replaced the locks on the first floor windows, and even put in extra deadbolts. He worked diligently and methodically, explaining every detail. "You see, Mr. Miller," he said, demonstrating the new lock, "this is a high-security cylinder. You can make a duplicate key only in a specialized workshop and then with a special code. You can't just copy such a key in the first kiosk you come across." After replacing the locks, I contacted a security company. A young manager named Tyler arrived the same day and offered several options for security systems. "Given your situation, Mr. Miller," he said after studying the house plan, "I recommend a comprehensive system. Motion sensors around the perimeter, security cameras at all entrances, and an alarm system that goes to the security desk. If someone tries to break in, you'll know immediately, and so will we. And the cameras will be visible from the outside. We can do both visible and hidden. Visible ones work as a psychological deterrent. Most people will abandon their plans when they see a camera. The hidden ones allow you to record the actions of those who don't know about the surveillance. We chose a combination of several visible cameras at the main entrance and garage, and hidden cameras around the rest of the perimeter. The installation took a whole day, but I was happy with the result. Now any attempt to approach the house will be recorded and the footage automatically saved to cloud storage. On Thursday, I went to the doctor for a routine checkup. Dr. Richardson, my family doctor for over 15 years, was surprised by my request for additional tests. "Clarence, why do you suddenly need a comprehensive mental status exam?" he asked, looking at my medical records. "Any complaints?" "No complaints, Dick, but I need documentation that I'm of sound mind and good judgment." I told him about my daughter's situation and a possible lawsuit. Dr. Richardson frowned and shook his head. "Unfortunately, these cases are not uncommon, especially when large sums of money are involved. It's a good thing you bothered to get a medical report beforehand. He conducted a detailed examination, tests for memory, attention, logical thinking, emotional stability. The results were excellent for my age. The doctor made a detailed report where it was written in black and white that I am fully capable, I do not suffer from any mental disorders, and I am able to make my own decisions. Keep copies of this report in different places, he advised, and if you need additional examinations, please contact me. I am ready to confirm my conclusions in any instance. Friday night, I was sitting in the living room, looking at the new alarm control system. The monitor displayed images from all the cameras, the front door, the backyard, the driveway, the garage. The house had become like a small fortress, but it made it feel safe. It was at that moment that the doorbell rang. On the monitor, I saw an unfamiliar young man in a courier service uniform with a package in his hands. I turned on the intercom. "What do you want?" I asked. "A letter from Mr. Clarence Miller. Delivery with return receipt requested." "Who's the letter from?" The courier looked at the label. "Mrs. Heather Thompson." I opened the door and signed for it. The envelope was thick, expensive, with the embossed logo of some law firm. Inside were two documents, a letter from Heather and a legal notice from the law firm of King, Marshall and Associates. The letter from her daughter was handwritten in her neat, familiar handwriting. It began with the words, "Dear Daddy," and was full of regrets in attempts at reconciliation. "Dear Daddy, I am writing this letter to you with a heavy heart because I realize that our relationship has reached an impasse. There have been so many painful conversations between us in recent weeks, so many mutual accusations that I fear we may lose each other forever. I've thought a lot about what's been going on, and I've come to the conclusion that we've both made mistakes. I have been too pushy about things that concern your future. Perhaps my suggestions about the paperwork did seem like an attempt to limit your freedom. That wasn't my intent, but I can understand why you would think that. On the other hand, it pains me to see you trust strangers more than your own daughter. These lawyers don't know you, don't like you, didn't grow up in your home. To them, you're just a client, a source of income. To me, you're my only father, my only connection to my childhood and my mom. Dad, I say we start over. Forget the paperwork. Forget the lawyers. Forget all our arguments. Let's just be father and daughter like we used to be. I'll come to visit. We'll have dinner and talk about life, not just formalities. If you need help, I'll help you. If you don't, I won't impose. If you want to change something in your life, we'll discuss it together. But let's do it as a family, not as rivals in some legal dispute. Cole regrets that abrupt conversation with you too. He's worried about our relationship and is willing to apologize for his words. We both realize we went too far in trying to convince you of the rightness of our proposals. Dad, I don't want your money or your house. I want a father who's alive and well, who I can talk to, who I can hug, who's happy to see my daughter. How hard can it be? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make peace. I'm willing to never bring up papers or wills again. I'm willing to see you only when you want me to. I would do anything to repair our relationship. Think about it, please. Life is too short to spend it fighting with the people closest to you. Your loving daughter, Heather P.S. The attached letter from the lawyers is a formality that I was forced to fulfill on Cole's advice. Please don't take it as a threat. It is simply an attempt to show you the seriousness of my intentions about reconciliation. The letter struck me as sincere and touching. For a moment, I felt the familiar desire to believe, to forgive, to put things back the way they were. But then I remembered Patricia's words about changing tactics and read the official notice from the lawyers. It was a dry, legal document informing me that Heather Thompson intended to petition the court to declare me partially incapacitated due to age-related cognitive changes and being under the influence of third parties acting for profit. The grounds cited were isolation from family, unfounded suspicions about close relatives, trust in strangers to the detriment of family ties, and inability to adequately assess my own interests. The notice ended with a proposal to settle the matter out of court by voluntarily executing partial guardianship documents. In this case, litigation could be avoided and family relations could be normalized. I reread both documents again. The contrast between the daughter's touching letter and the cold threat from the lawyers was stark. Heather's letter waived all her demands and asked only for reconciliation, while the lawyers were preparing to file a lawsuit for my incapacity on the same day. It was classic good cop, bad cop tactics. Heather played the role of a loving daughter who only wants peace, and the lawyers played the role of stern protectors of her interests who would act tough if a voluntary agreement could not be reached. I called Patricia and read both documents to her. "Mr. Miller," she said after a pause, "that's very clever of them. The daughter's letter can be used in court as proof of her good intentions, and the official notice as a legitimate attempt to settle the matter amicably. So they'll actually sue?" "Most likely, yes. But we have a medical report on your competency and a recording of a threatening conversation with your son-in-law. Their accusations seem unfounded." "What about the offer of an out-of-court settlement?" "Absolutely not. Partial custody is a euphemism for control over your finances and property. By agreeing to it, you will be giving them exactly what they have been seeking all along." In the evening, I sat in my chair by the fireplace for a long time, reflecting on what had happened. It was raining outside the window, drops dripping down the glass, and the room was warm and cozy. My home, my hearth, the place where I had lived the best years of my life. Now it would have to be fought for in court, against my own daughter who was once the dearest person in my life, the daughter who grew up in this house, played in this garden, took her first steps on this floor. What turned a caring child into a greedy adult willing to cheat her own father for money? When did this metamorphosis happen, or had I just not noticed its true nature before? I stood up and walked over to the pictures on the mantel. Heather in her high school uniform, Heather at prom, Heather in her wedding dress. In all the pictures, she's smiling, looking happy and genuine. Was it really all a mask? Or maybe the problem was money? $350,000 is a really large amount of money for middle-income people. Maybe they have financial problems that I don't know about. Maybe they've gotten into debt and are desperate for money. But even if that's the case, does that justify trying to cheat my father? Couldn't they have just asked for help, explained the situation honestly? I went back to my chair and read Heather's letter again. Every phrase was calibrated, every word precisely chosen. Too perfect for a spontaneous outburst of remorse. Most likely the letter had been drafted with the help of a psychologist or public relations professional. At 10 p.m., the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered. "Dad?" Heather sounded excited. "Did you get my letter?" "I did, both documents." "Dad, please ignore this legal notice," Cole insisted. "He says without the legal formalities, you won't understand the gravity of the situation." "And you agree with him?" "Yeah, I want us to reconcile without going to court. But Cole says you can't hear us, that you've been turned against us by these lawyers." "Heather, I need you to answer one question honestly." "Sure, Dad." "If I refuse to reconcile on your terms, will you really file a petition with the court to have me incapacitated?" She was quiet for a few seconds. "Daddy, I hope it doesn't come to that. I really hope it doesn't." "That doesn't answer my question. If there's no other option, if you persist, then yes, I may have to go to court for your own protection. For my protection or to gain control of my estate." "Dad, what are you talking about?" She sounded hysterical. "I told you in the letter, I don't want your money." "Then why the trial?" "To protect you from those people who take advantage of your trust, to bring you back to your family." "I see. So if I don't agree to live by your rules, you'll declare me crazy?" "Not crazy," she screamed. "An elderly person who needs help and support." "Thank you for your candor," I said and hung up. The phone rang again, but I didn't answer it. Then it rang again. The third time, I simply disconnected it, so the cards were finally laid bare. Heather didn't want reconciliation. She wanted surrender. Total surrender to her will under threat of a lawsuit. But I was prepared for that fight. I had good lawyers, medical certificates of competency, tapes of threats from Cole, and most importantly, I had the truth. I got up and walked around the house, checking the locks and alarms. Everything was securely locked, all systems were working. My house had become a fortress, and I was ready to defend it to the end. Tomorrow would start a new day, probably the last day before the trial began. But I was no longer afraid. I had made my choice to live by my own rules, not the dictates of those who called themselves family, but acted like enemies. The price of truth was high, the loss of my only daughter. But the price of lying would be even higher, the loss of myself. I turned off the light in the living room and went upstairs to the bedroom. The house creaked, settling down for the night like an old ship in a quiet harbor. My home, my fortress, my final resting place. And I'm not giving it up to anyone.